Hey guys, welcome back to Action Games and Comics Review Show. I'm Ed.
Kevin.
And a special introduction to another correspondent, the main man, the guy who runs the store, Tony.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Hello.
Alright guys, we're going to open up this week with some reviews, and this week we're going to open up with Marvel books.
We have two important books this week from Marvel Comics. The first is Fear Itself, number 4, by the creative team of Matt Fraction and Stuart Immonen. Matt Fraction coming off of his Eisner-winning run on Invincible Iron Man, current writer of Uncanny X-Men, and Stuart Immonen, who has pretty much come up, he's been around for a while, but his new stuff has been the New Avengers run. He did 1 through 7, and I think he's continuing on that as well. So Fear Itself 4, it opens up with the events occurring after the death of Bucky Barnes. There's an interesting line. The first page shows Thor being sent back to Earth once again by his father with a cool line, "Oh father, you will be the death of me," which just sort of sets the tone with Fraction's very literary style. Barnes, of course, dead by Sin in her Scotty persona via the Worthy powers during a siege on Washington. I think this was a really good book. What's cool about Fear Itself, and I think the Marvel meta right now, is that there's a very realistic portrayal of human reaction to the meta-human concept. There's a line when some of the town folks of Broxton meet with Thor. They ask Thor, "Do you have any idea what's going on down here? Do you get a good view of that from your magic floating castle?" And it's an interesting change from the way heroes have been handled like gods in the past. I think it's more realistic, because really, how would we all feel if there were, these ultimately powered individuals running around the earth? It would be very threatening for non-powered individuals.
Absolutely, kind of springboards off of the whole events of Siege, because Siege kind of paved the platform for showing a lot of the more normal, people seeing on the media and through television and whatnot about Asgard being, taken down by Norman Osborn and whatnot. I kind of feel like they've incorporated a certain amount of the what were those books called? The ones where they just showed the reporters, through a lot of different events.
Frontline and now Homefront.
Right, exactly. It kind of reminds me a lot of that, but actually putting them into the actual main books instead of having you pick up, a $3.99 book, talking about reporters dealing with events you already know that are happening. Yeah. So I personally kind of like that.
Steve is back basically in this book. I'm on the opposite end. I didn't like this book. I really didn't like this book. I mean, the whole Fear Itself, like, okay, yeah, they killed Bucky and everything like that, but this book hasn't really been doing it for me. I mean, it really has not. I just get to the slugfest for this book. It's just get to the slug. The best thing about that entire book, in my opinion, was the very end, where I can't wait for the smackdown between Hulk thing and Thor. That's the only thing I care about. Other than that, the story really has been moving me. Yes, there's big discovery in the book, but I could care less for it. That's the thing about it.
I can kind of understand what you're saying, because I kind of feel the same way about the book, is the fact that there's a lot of things that have led up to this point when it comes to Fear Itself, but I personally don't have the emotional investment in the characters to really care.
I looked at it, I'm like, it's on issue 4, and I'm like, oh god, I gotta wait for 3 more issues.
Exactly.
In my opinion, I say, if you're picking up Fear Itself, yeah, pick it up. In my opinion, don't. I say no.
Oh, well, I absolutely disagree with you. I think this is an excellent event. I think it's been wonderfully written. The artwork is excellent. If you've been reading any of Fraction's work, really, but you do have to be a Marvel fan to appreciate Fear Itself. I mean, if you aren't invested in the characters, then you're not going to really care about what's going on. But the same can be said for any company event. And I'll agree with you. Like, Marvel seems to be hitting this trend with their events where you get a real bang opener, and then the few issues in the middle start to drag a little bit. But I don't know. I personally think that they've ultimately been successful because each final conflict, final resolution in each of the events, whether it was Civil War, Siege, and now Fear itself, have changed the course of the Marvel universe. But of course, if you don't care,
well, this isn't knocking Fraction's work at all. But
I personally agree with that because my thing about it is Marvel has this way of, and now don't get me wrong, they have great creators there. They have, Fraction is a great writer, and they have consistently had, great writing and great art for a lot of their events. The thing that always gets me about Marvel, though, is they always seem to push that shock in their events. It isn't really so much about the great writing, even though they do have great writing. Yeah. It's more about, like, what do people think about when they think of Siege? Yeah. It was, Ares getting torn apart by the Sentry.
Ares getting torn apart.
And then the last issue, they had, Sin doing what she did to Bucky, which seemed very similar when it came to looking at kind of...
Well, the death of Bucky did strike me as a little bit cheesy. I mean, I couldn't help but seeing when they showed Bucky on the slab, and it's Stark and Fury and Bucky. It's like, oh, look, they killed Captain America again.
So, well, it's just that's all they did. But I say no. Tony, what do you say?
I say yes.
Kev?
I would say if you are an invested Marvel fan, I would suggest picking it up. If you're a person that perhaps was looking for Fear itself as a platform to be able to lead into the Marvel continuity at this point, I personally wouldn't suggest it.
That's what I forgot to mention. You know what this book feels like? This book feels like they're ripping off of friggin' Blackest Night mixed with it's Sinestro.
I don't understand that at all.
Yeah.
Well, they're using fear.
I'm a little puzzled by that.
Well, the power industry, but that's whatever.
Right.
Our next book, Tone?
The second book is a new limited series by Joe Casey with art by Nick Dragotta called Vengeance. And Vengeance, I didn't know anything about it. It somehow flew under my radar in previews. But the cover was quite, intense and stark looking and drew me in. And it was kind of a toss up this week between that and the new Pack Red Skull mini, and we decided with Vengeance.
I think you made the better choice.
And I don't know, because I haven't read Pack's Vengeance, but
is Pack Vengeance that bad?
No, Pack's Red Skull.
Yeah, Pack Red Skull.
All I can say is the quote on the cover is, "They say the generation gap is drawn in blood." I think they're right. I would say they say the generation gap is drawn like crap, and I think they're right. This book makes very little sense. I'm going to go ahead and I will defer to almost anybody who can explain it to me, and then perhaps it'll be a revelation.
Only one thing in that entire book, and there's only one thing that's actually interesting in that entire book. But after that, I'm like, I mostly don't care for it.
Well, the setup is this for people who actually want to know what the book is about. We start up. We've got in the space of the first 4 to 5 pages, we've got 3 different time periods. One, the recent past. One, the present, and one in 1944. We get a kind of weird, incoherent drug club scene where we're introduced to the main character, who is Mr. X, the Ultimate Nullifier, who is a cool character. Don't get me wrong. We find out he's working with some sort of clandestine group of depowered mutants. To what ends, I don't know.
Yeah, and again, he's as Tony said, Ultimate Nullifier. Also, there's another character in here that basically their version. It's a female version of Captain America. She reminds me too much of what's it called, like Wonder Woman. It's Marvel's version of Wonder Woman. What's it, Miss American.
Miss America Chavez.
Yeah,
and she's Latino, Tom Yang, so
the one thing I want to say about Joe Casey, I love Joe Casey. Joe Casey is a great writer on certain things. Joe Casey is known for doing a very kind of slapstick, surrealist take on things, and in this book, which I think is trying to be hip and modern, like all the dialogue is horribly canned. I wrote up a couple of really choice bits. There's
pretty incoherent.
When Magneto interrupts the creepy threesome that's occurring between Mr. X and 2 chicks that he picked up at the club, he says, they're freaked out and they leave, and his words are, "Yo, Stacy, thanks for the pheromone tickle push. Catch you on the flip side, girlfriend." Nobody talks like that.
No.
I mean, and I understand it's a comic book, but I mean, the pheromone tickle push. I'm gonna start calling sex that. Just because.
Pheromone tickle push.
You know what I mean? And then maybe after it gets ingrained in our common vernacular, 10 years from now, this book will make sense.
Well, it's kind of like conversation we had about what's it called when certain films or whatnot, the dialogue for certain superhero films or whatever. Some people like to do old school, the way heroes just talk back in the day. It's trying to like, oh, we're gonna make up this new type of dialogue that's gonna be hip and cool now.
This book reminded me of, I want to say, Joe Casey's attempt at bridging one decent limited series from Marvel, that being Next Wave by
you were
Warren Ellis.
telling me
That
about
was
that
very
earlier.
And the other being True Believers, who I don't actually recall who wrote it. But True Believers and Next Wave only have really one thing in common, which is why I make the comparison, is the fact that these are characters that we've never seen before, that don't really have a niche or an area in Marvel, so instead they decided to make them as weird as humanly possible, and so unexplainable and really unlikable, but hoping for that really, really rare people that will read it and be like, wow, that's so edgy and cool.
Exactly.
I mean, literally, only
what it
one,
feels like.
one
Exactly.
thing caught me in the whole book, and that's when, you know, it's when the ultimate nullifier fights May. That's the only thing. I'm like reading this, and I said, I don't care. I'm reading it. I'm like, wow, this is very uninteresting. And then, oh, snap. But then it goes back to, I don't really care anymore.
Biggest question is, why is Mr. X wearing a Captain America scaled shirt?
That was weird. Is he cosplaying? I mean, is that club wear? Like in Joe Casey land, does he go to nightclub? Where does he live? Is the nightclub scene invested with like comic book cosplayers there?
It must be.
I was waiting to see if he had like a little pacifier, dropper around his
Well,
neck.
he takes some kind of drug. I think they call it, what is it, like TMZ?
Yeah, TMZ.
Where can I get some of that? It makes wearing chest plates cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, there's what's really going on at the end. There's one page that has 4 panels with 4 scenes that aren't touched on any place else in the book, where we see somehow Doctor Doom is involved in this as well.
Yeah, I don't
And they also
I don't
threw
know.
in Mein Führer into the story in order to place that whole, like, hey, this has relevance.
Well, I think they're doing that.
But
that looks
why?
like,
How?
It looks like they're doing that for the film.
Exactly.
Because that's what it looked like. When I remember when I was reading this, I'm like, Kev, is this the same book? He's like, yeah. I'm like, because this looks like. I'm like, wait, did they do like a special Captain America?
I was totally expecting to see, a Subway presents, Hitler and Red Skull, a little insert inside the book,
I say,
because it totally didn't make any sense format-wise. It was like, okay, we have these edgy, weird, unlikable characters, then we have Red Skull and Hitler, and then we have right back to those uninteresting characters.
Yeah. With no segue between them.
Absolutely.
Maybe issue 2 will be better.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll tie up a lot of
make
things.
sense, but
I hope so.
I say, no, don't pick it up. Kev, what's your take on it? Tony?
Avoid it.
All right.
Like to play.
All right, our next book we're going to be talking about is an old school, basically a new school and an old school take. Michael Moorcock's Elric. And you know what? Kevin's more of a history buff with this because...
Well, actually, Tony and I have both read Elric. I'm not really sure to the extent that Tony has read into it. And I myself have tried to be diligent with the book, but it's changed hands so many times that trying to put together the overall continuity set in this book is difficult at best.
When I take what's going on here, a guy named Eric, who's a a computer gaming designer,
right.
And he's having dreams of this character Elric. Right? The otherworldly things are happening, and his main story premise is his brother's a politician, and it's taking place on this story. But then something big is supposed to be happening in this book. Things taking circle. I feel really lost in this book because I have not invested in old school Eric.
That's because
I feel like Eric in this book because Eric doesn't know what's going on.
For some strange reason, what they seem to have done in this book is try to find a platform and a bridging point between the old school Elric fans, which I assume that there are still some of you out there, and those that are now picking up the book under the new company.
I dig the idea that they're doing with Eric because remember I told you that last time we read the Zero issue, and I said, you know what, they're doing Eric and to feel lost, and I said, you know what, I get that. To feel lost, I mean, the character's lost, and you're like, okay, you're going to feel the same way. Eric's lost, not going to know what's going on, and then he gets thrown into this whole scenario of what's happening.
For me, I've read the first 6 books of Elric, and I also read Moorcock's Multiverse way back in the day. And it's kind of cool for anybody, the stalwarts that have read that series, or of course if you're a fan of Michael Moorcock, because he's using the same characters, all his stuff. Michael Moorcock, of course, is famous
They did in the beginning, like he's fighting all these undead creatures, mutants or whatnot, and that was one of them. And then his normal self, which hasn't been touched on apparently, right? His him being in our world has never been touched on.
This seems to be more like that. Eric and the whole Elric thing is more like an interpretation of two different worlds, but very similar events. It kind of seems like they're shadowing each other, but in different ways.
Yeah,
right.
Which I think is a very interesting dynamic.
It is, but I kind of get where you're coming from. Also, if you haven't read Moorcock, it is a little bit difficult to approach.
Yeah.
They're going to. I feel as though they did spend, I'd say half the book trying to fill you in, but when you're talking about a literally 50-year-old franchise. It's difficult. It's a little bit inaccessible.
This was pretty incoherent for me. I didn't get it. For me, if I would say I would give it another chance, because I have not invested in the history. That's the thing about it.
Now I don't find anything wrong with this book, even for like old fans or new fans. What I will say is that with the kind of epic that Elric is, that in the first couple issues, I don't think that you'll really understand the gravitas behind the actual writing quality that's going to be in this book.
I see there's probably going to be something there, but this book, it didn't grip me the first time. Like, that's the thing. For new readers, it might be overshadowing. I don't know. I would say pick it up to try it, and stay on for a couple of books. If it's not your cup of tea, get off. That's what I'm going to try to do. See if I enjoy this type. But I'm not really too invested in it. That's the thing. I am not invested like you guys are.
Well, I definitely recommend this book to any fans of the fantasy genre. You've got Chris Roberson, who is a science fiction fantasy writer in his own right, who has just recently made a very successful transition to comic books, and I think was the perfect choice to adapt Moorcock. It's going to be a little bit difficult at first, but having read, hundreds of pages of Moorcock myself, I know there's enough content and wonderful story to make this book interesting, if you just give it a minute to let the universe sink in.
I'll give it a chance. That's the thing. I got to give it a chance, because this looks like I'll give it a chance. I'll give it a shot. That's what I just suggest. Give it a shot for a while. If you don't like it, you can always drop it.
Absolutely.
They say pick it up. I say give it a shot just for the chance. Our next book we're going to pick up on is by Image Book, and this is John Layman and Rob Gilroy. Chew number 19. This is number 4 of 5. Number 4 in the Flambe series. And if you guys have been reading Chew, I love this character. Tony Chew, he's basically a cop with the ability to. He's a superpath. Anything he eats, he sees the history of it. And this story basically picks up right after the whole. He finds out there's a Russian crash in the last station, and a little past thing with his sister Antonella, Tony with an I. She did a lot of psychedelic frogs. And that's what it was. They did in the last issue. They were doing. They made chicken frogs. That's what it was. Chicken frogs, and half of those chicken frogs had psychedelic drug. They were psychedelic frogs, so they were trying to feed that to the mass market.
There's a lot of psychedelic stuff in Chew in general.
In this book, Tony teams up with his sister Antonella, and she's part of the NASA Corps, right? And they're investigating on what's with the fire running in the sky, and something else is happening with these mutated babies. There's a little more in that there too. Also, there's also a little reveal on Antonella herself. I don't want to kill it, but this book is always funny as hell. There's also a scene with the diaper when she clears the room with everybody. She's telling everybody, "Oh yeah," she's like, "Oh yeah, see that guy? He has a special. He's from FDA. He's got that special weird power and everything like that. I'm gonna take this diaper. You guys want to see him eat it?"
This book's a little bizarre to me personally, just because I haven't been consistent in reading it. I read the first issue, and I've picked up every so often, but I haven't stuck with it.
The first issue actually hooked me, because I bought the first issue on a whim, and I'm just like, wow, is it gonna be this good? Is the rest gonna be this good? Read it, and it's got its deep storyline. One character I hope isn't gone is Pollo, the King of Cocks. Man, he was awesome.
Are you allowed to say that?
Yes, you can.
Yes,
A cock is an animal.
I'm messing with you.
he's a fighting cock.
Is it ever? I've been on Chew since #1 also. I love it. One thing you got to know about this book for anybody who hasn't picked it, because I think this is the first time it's been reviewed on this show.
Yes, it has.
So it basically, if it's unlike any other Image book.
Yeah.
Actually, I've never read a book quite like it. It seems to it's very funny. It's a comedy, I think, at its heart, but there's enough story to hook any genre aficionado. There is an overarching storyline. It's a little, it's very whimsical. There's a lot of physical comedy. The artwork sort of lends itself to that.
Well, that's why he got him for the, this guy got him he got him specifically for that artwork. This artist, he can do other things, but he specifically got him for that type of artwork. He's like, I want something that's going to look kooky and crazy.
It works, and it works perfectly.
And the writing is just so funny. You read his past stuff and up to now, it's just too. But you know what they say? They say that he wrote this character. When he wrote this character, it's kind of him, because if you know him in real life, they say he's like that.
Well, then I'd like to meet him.
Interesting.
I love this book. I say pick it up, Tony.
Absolutely, come pick up the trade. The first 3, I believe, are available now. Image does them for like $10 a pop. You can get them at our shop or your local comic retailer there. It's a great book.
Kev, what do you suggest?
Like I said before, I haven't really invested a whole lot of time into reading this series. What I will say is it's very funny. And the writing is definitely good. It's just I'm a little lost when it comes to the entirety of it.
Yeah, you got to get into it. It's just too funny.
Right.
Pick up. And we're going to move on.
Okay.
Kev.
Next up, we'll deal with some of the Flashpoint books, which first one we have is Flashpoint, Batman Night of Vengeance, #2. This story has to do with a lot of the interesting points when it comes to Flashpoint dealing with their version of the DC Universe and how dramatically different it is from main continuity, which obviously the greatest example was Flashpoint. Flashpoint #1.
Flashpoint #1 got everybody. I wasn't going to read Flashpoint until I finished that, and I'm like, oh god, this is good.
Absolutely. And this one just kind of expands on that concept about how weird and strange and new Flashpoint is versus the old DCU.
This book literally just did like I like the first book, but this one just like, man, this was one of my picks right here for the week. It's that good. It just when you there's 2 big things that happen in this book, and you just like, I didn't see that. You're not going to see it coming. That's the thing. I'm like, okay, wow, that happens, and then at the very, you're like, whoa, I did not see that coming at all.
Oh, absolutely.
You're not going to see nothing coming in this book. That's the thing about it.
Flashpoint 3 is we're Night of Vengeance.
Yes, Night of Vengeance.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's excellent. It's my favorite of the tie-ins. Actually, it's the one that I think has the most accessible, self-contained story.
Yeah.
A lot of the spin-offs, while they're honestly, I've read every single one of them and they're all good. What they're doing is a lot of world building, creating the new DC universe, basically, or at least something that's going. Elements of it are sure to be continued with the relaunch. And of course, you've got Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Riso, who is the team behind 100 Bullets, and they're fantastic on Batman because there's always been that element of noir in Batman, and this is not really a Batman book.
No.
This really is a Jim Gordon book, and you have Jim Gordon establishing himself as like a Philip Marlowe, of the DC universe, which really lends itself to the noir atmosphere. There's a huge reveal in it. A lot. There's actually a couple big reveals in it.
You do not see it coming. That's the thing.
There's no way.
No way.
And it will throw you off because most people, definitely because I like to check a lot of the forums and a lot of the people's opinions when it comes to upcoming books, and most people's opinion about what this scary little reveal is when it comes to this book is completely wrong.
And not only if you have read it, don't want forums to read. So.
Oh no.
Just read the book. That's all.
Absolutely. Beyond the fact that it's kind of weird in this book, because there's been a large opinion that DC's been trying very, very hard to kind of weed out a lot of the Alan Moore influences in their DCU because there's so many.
Well, yeah.
And they've been trying to streamline things and kind of pull it away from that because he's constantly criticizing them for continuing to use stories and ideas that he's established in his own runs.
You're talking about
the
yes.
yes.
I don't want to say.
Needless to say,
Actually, 3 reveals.
They try
There's 3
very
shots.
hard to get away from it, but there is a very, very large Alan Moore reference in this, just in a very slightly different way.
Yes, pick it up, most definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you read the first one, for sure, it continues the search for Harvey Dent's children.
But this one just blows it out the water. The second one issue just like literally like wow, that's
well. At the end of the second issue, you're like, how many issues of this
yeah,
are
exactly.
there?
There's 3. That's why I'm like, you know what? I want to read. I kind of wish when they do when everything relaunches, they just keep Thomas Wayne somewhere as Batman.
Well, I would just like to see Azzarello and Riso do Batman. Period.
Yes. Yeah.
I really have liked Snyder's Batman on Detective, but man, Azzarello is born to write this character. Gotham City, belongs to Azzarello.
Pick it up.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Flashpoint number 3. Flashpoint number 3, I think, is my personal favorite of the 3 so far. I mean, you can tell, and I was actually talking to Tony about this earlier, is the fact that Jim Lee, you can tell that he's all over Flashpoint. I mean, especially with some of the reveals in this, some of the characters that they deal with, that they haven't really shown so far in the Flashpoint books.
There was 2 big reveals in that book.
Yes.
There was 2 big reveals that you don't see coming. And it solves the problem with one of them because it was a tie-in book that you don't know who it is, right? And then it basically, if you read it, what Superman's up to.
It straightens the ball.
And oh man.
Well, it's not just that. It's Barry Allen has the idea is Barry Allen has managed to convince Thomas Wayne of his version of reality to at least to a certain extent that he's willing to hear him out and not kick the crap out of him. We've seen in the earlier issues of Flashpoint that Cyborg was trying to put together a Justice League of sorts to try and prevent some of the collateral damage that's been occurring in the war between the Amazons and Atlantis. And basically, after he's convinced by Flash that something needs to give, he goes ahead and takes Cyborg up on his offer on the condition that he is allowed to select the members of the team. And then, of course, they just for you readers out there, the big question of where Superman is in all this is answered.
Yes.
And
in a
really disturbing way.
Yes.
It's going to shock you.
And also, the other thing was, if you guys been reading Lois on Resistance, you find out who the leader is, and that I was like, that's awesome.
It was awesome.
That was awesome. But I highly recommend this book. I loved it.
I have one thing to say about this book, though. I hate because it's my pick of the week. I'll say that first. And I mean, Jeff Johns is my favorite DC writer that's working right now. And Andy Kubert is become a legend, in that family. But I just have to say one thing. Kubert, now, there's this thing that happens in comic books where, there's this constant debate between artistic integrity and meeting deadlines, selling books. And I think this is actually this book in particular is a very good example of how that can kind of defeat the book itself, because Kubert's art is awesome. When Kubert is allowed the time to finish a panel and to plan stuff out and to really put his all into his art, there is nobody better for doing comic book art. But if you look at some of the panels in this book, particular just shots that are linking panel to panel, when they're moving, running through the sewers, that kind of stuff, it's not that good. I mean, he really, it looks like stuff that he slapped together very quickly. And it's a shame, because Kubert is amazing. But, I mean, I guess it's the ultimate, it's the thing. It's like, do you want a late book, or do you want a perfect book?
Exactly. Next thing you know...
and I don't know. I mean, I'd like both, obviously. Yeah. But it's impossible to do a monthly that's a masterpiece.
Think about it. Next thing you know, the relaunch is like, when's the relaunch set? Oh, it's in it's in October.
Well, that's a good point too. And so, in order to go ahead and facilitate the rebirth, the relaunch of the DC universe, you kind of do have to commit to a schedule. But it does bring up an interesting question. Check the book out, because you'll see there's a huge disparity in quality between certain panels. Certain panels you look and you're like, wow, this could be blown up wall size, and then certain panels you're like, that's not the way an arm goes. That's not the way legs look when they run. It's kind of weird. But that's just me. it's something I noticed. You know, I mean, we're all going to be frothy about this book in particular. It was fantastic. Best book on the shelf this week.
Yes.
I don't know.
Must pick up. It's, when you find out with Superman, you're like, oh wow, I can't believe they did that.
Well, beyond the fact that they've never really done anything like this.
No,
Superman.
they've never done anything like that with Superman. That's what shocked the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
I recommend picking it up, Tony. Tony's completely on board with it too. Kevin's on board with it too. Well, that ends our review show today. Catch us next week. I'm Ed.
Kevin.
Tony.
We'll see you next week.